This is one of those instances where the chronicler of the obscure is left having to confess that no amount of digging has been able to produce anything at all substantial about the author of the work in question today. Given several pro-Union references, in the context of the US Civil War, written into a historical anecdote section of this book, may be a slight indication that this Charles Aikin was the same Charles Aikin who in 1895, the year the book in question came out, wrote a letter to the Atlanta Constitution praising Mary A.H. Gay's book, Life in Dixie During the War. The letter in question is headed with the title, From the Other Side, a Union Soldier's Tribute to a Southern Woman's Book. Intriguingly, the letter is noted to have been written at Evanston, which some sources link with the publisher, Regan Printing House, though it is more often linked to Chicago. Using Evanston as a link, it is possible this was the same Charles Aikin as Charles F. Aikin, born in 1833, in New York, who married Serinda Huntoon in Evanston in 1870. There is another Charles F. Aikin who lived between 1861 and 1941, but if we accept the tenuous link between the Charles Aikin who wrote this book and the one who sent the letter in relation to Mrs. Mary Gay's book, then this latter Charles F. Aikin cannot be our man, given he was born in the year the Civil War broke out. The publisher of today's work itself seems very obscure, and online resources can't exactly agree on his name either, though the book quite clearly mentions Regan Printing House. The novel in question, 40 Years with the Damned, or Life Inside the Earth, a novel, from a cursory glance, would seem to come from a somewhat amateur publication. There are instances of repeated words and missing characters. The writing itself would also suggest someone more dabbling rather than an experienced hand. In short, this is formally a story about a paradisical afterlife existence inside the earth in a place called Surrey. Definitely doesn't strike me as a very Edenic sort of name. However, seeing as this is a utopia of the most sickening kind, the author decides, after subjecting us to a full chapter of extremely tedious and long-winded descriptions of theatres and opera houses, to not focus on this utopia overmuch, instead letting people either speak of their past lives or to follow the main character on a spirit journey to Mars. These are a mixed bag. For example, the only story taking place inside the Earth, dealing with the Utopian city's attack on Hell, is over-brief, lacking in detail, and is over before it's pretty much started. And in contrast, the story of a Southerner pursuing his eloping daughter and then shooting her husband while drunk ends up having more substance and holds a much stronger interest. The Martian story is the most interesting in a certain way, and one would hope that Aikin had focused only on that, as the spirit interventions of the main character, when he does intervene, are extremely brief, circumstantial, and could easily be written around. On the other hand, the story focusing on the Toltecs and Aztecs is the most confusing, as Aikin seems to just treat them as medieval Europeans, being knights-errant, holding tourneys on horseback with lances and the like, and it's one of the more odd goofs of the writing, which also includes statements such as, black people are by natural law motivated to serve white people even in the afterlife. No one will ever reach the North Pole, or a completely meaningless incident where the main character runs into a conclave of sirens talking about all the bones of the victims displayed in their palaces, which information the main character learns only to leave and for it to never come up again. Basically, the principal male protagonist is a black man who it turns out was never actually black, and his wife, who come from former slave stock, but who end up not really having any character or personality. As the second they wind up in the subterranean city, they kind of lose all agency or desire to do anything, since they're in a perfect utopia, and so there's not really much of a character arc with these two. To add insult to injury, the book ends with the hunter who had all this narrated to him waking up from a dream. I will not dignify this last development with a response.